The 2018 Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series. Brought to you from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting. The Republican Race for Governor.
Good evening, I'm Karen Greer, an anchor and investigative reporter with CBS 46 here in Atlanta. Welcome to the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series, originating from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting in Atlanta. This is the runoff debate among Republican candidates for governor of Georgia. Before we get started, I'd like to give a special recognition to Charlie Loudermilk, who endowed this debate series and is celebrating his 91st birthday today. Happy birthday, Charlie. Now, let's meet our candidates. They are in alphabetical order. Casey Cagle has served as governor, Georgia's lieutenant governor since 2007. And Brian Kemp is the current Secretary of State for Georgia. And let's meet our panelists right now. Giancarlo Cifuentes is the regional news director at Univision Atlanta. Maggie Lee is freelance reporter covering Georgia politics. And Sandra Parrish covers state government for WSB Radio. Now let's get started on the rules for tonight's debate, and you can visit the Atlanta Press Club website, atlantapressclub.org. To start the debate, each candidate will be asked 2 questions by our panelists. Maggie Lee, you get the first question to Casey Cagle.
Sure. Lieutenant Governor Cagle, a few months ago, you got a lot of attention for threatening to block a Delta tax break when the company cut a discount to the NRA. As governor, though, how will you work with business leaders or local political leaders in cases when y'all differ on policy? What is that relationship going to be like?
Well, obviously, I'm proud to have helped build the #1 place to do business in, and we certainly are proud of Delta. They're our #1 employer in the state of Georgia. And the reality for Delta is that tax cut actually did not go into place, but it was one in which they were asking for, a $40 to $50 million tax cut. And because of their actions, obviously, we made a decision not to give them, but they're no worse off than they were at the current time. And I think it is important that businesses continue to be focused as the fiduciary to the shareholders in which they represent and not get into a discriminatory aspect of business. And we'll continue to be the #1 state to do business because we're going to remain low in our taxes along with our regulatory environment, our tort system, and a workforce that is second to none.
All right, Giancarlo, you may ask the question now to our Secretary of State, Brian Kemp.
Mr. Kemp, I would like to ask you a question. Your new ad campaign features a young man agreeing with some of your political views. Amongst these young men, millennials, there are certainly many eligible Hispanic voters that will go on July 24th to cast their vote. Some of them, they probably have parents that are illegal in this country. Some of them might have relatives that are illegal or just friends. What would be your message to them to win their vote?
Well, first of all, thank you for the question. Thank you for the opportunity to be on. It's been an honor to be on the campaign trail for over the last 15 months, talking about my conservative 4-point plan and putting Georgians first. And I think there's a big difference in the race as we get into the runoff. It's about who do you trust to say the right thing when no one's watching and do the right thing when no one's watching versus somebody that's just hungry for a political game and will put politics over principle. But I would say to that young man, I'd like to have his vote because my conservative 4-point plan is about making Georgia #1 for small business, fundamentally reforming state government, strengthening rural Georgia, and keeping our families safe. And that includes tracking and deporting criminal illegals and stopping street gangs, because we're not going to be the #1 state in the country for business if we're not safe.
All right, Sandra Parrish, your turn to ask a question to Lieutenant Governor.
Lieutenant Governor Cagle, you've addressed the secret recording made by a former opponent in the primary regarding the tax credit for private school scholarships. What assurance can you give voters if elected that any bill or policy that you support or don't support are for the right reasons and are not politically motivated? And secondly, is it ever appropriate to have a conversation with a lawmaker about how legislation might affect campaign contributions?
Well, first and foremost, obviously the actions that were taken by Clay Tippins is unfortunate and under false pretense. Came into my office and made a claim that he wanted a confidential conversation. I will tell you that no one has worked harder on educational reform measures than I have. No bill is perfect, but I will tell you that I worked 2 years to make the SSO, along with additional charter school funding, available, as well as fully funding K-12 education. And I'm proud of the work in which we have done. And I will tell you what I'm sad about is that individuals that come in under a false pretense and record you breaks a level of trust. And to have my opponent to be colluding with this individual clearly shows that trust is an important issue in this campaign.
All right, Maggie Lee, your question to Secretary Kemp.
Sure, Secretary Kemp. Let's talk a little bit about President Donald Trump, some of his policies. Some of his ideas can even divide his supporters, like on tariffs. Mm-hmm. To what extent, if any, do you think President Trump could or should reconsider some of his policies?
Well, look, let me tell you, I'm a strong supporter of Donald Trump and the job he's doing as our president. He's working very hard. He's doing exactly what he told people he was going to do in his campaign. He's putting Americans first and wanting to make America great again. You know, I understand that because I'm running a campaign to put Georgians first. I think that's what people are looking for, and I trust him. He's got good people around him. He's got a lot of good legislators, many of them right here in the state of Georgia, that are working with him on those policies, and I'm going to support him. Is everything he's doing perfect? Well, that's for the public to decide, but our economy has never been better than it is now, and I know it's a lot better than having Hillary Clinton in office, and you can look to the recent Supreme Court appointee and the one before that as good measure for that position.
All right, that concludes the first portion of the debate. The candidates will now ask each other 3 questions. Each candidate will have 30 seconds to ask the question, 60 seconds to respond, and 30 seconds for a rebuttal. By random selection, Casey Cagle, you may ask the first question to Brian Kemp.
Secretary Kemp, as the Secretary of State, you obviously have had a number of issues that have come forward. Number one is that there was over 6 million Social Security numbers that were released, and sadly enough, you've got a record of blaming that. Along with the farmers in Kentucky that you said you would pay, you also blamed it on the downturn in the economy as a result of that. You also were defaulted $500,000 on a loan that you, sadly enough, blamed someone else on. When are you going to take accountability for your own actions?
Well, I'm glad to answer that question and talk about my record as Secretary of State, an agency where we have 250 employees, and we've moved the needle and made state government more efficient, made the Secretary of State's office more efficient. But the fact of the matter is you should be explaining the lies that you're telling, and you're doing this to deflect your own words on the Clay Tippins tape of putting politics and campaign contributions ahead of good public policy. I flatly do not owe a single farmer any money. I was an 8% investor. You're a person that talks all the time about investments and making investments and being investors and starting small businesses. I took a risk to invest in a company. I was not running that company. I didn't have fiduciary responsibility. I've urged that company to pay the farmers back, to pay the people they owe back, to pay me back, and I have a lot at risk myself financially. So you should start telling the truth.
A rebuttal?
Well, I'd be delighted to tell the truth, and I think I have a record of telling the truth, and the truth is that I pay my bills. I also pay my taxes, and when I enter into an agreement, I am always going to be there to ensure that I do exactly what I said. This race is about a record. This race is about accomplishments and doing the things that benefit the citizens of the state, and I will never apologize for that. I will always fight for what's best for Georgia, and we've done that through taxes along with historic job numbers, not blaming someone else and doing a poor job as Secretary of State.
Secretary Kemp, your question now for the Lieutenant Governor.
Well, as we all know, Casey, in the Tippins tape, and this is your own words, Casey Cagle's words, you said, quote, "It ain't about good public policy, it's about blank politics. There's a group about to put $3 million behind Hunter Hill The deal has already been done. I was playing defense, and I'm just being honest with you, end quote. So the question is, were you lying to Clay Tippins on tape, or are you lying now to cover up this corruption scandal?
Well, the only person that is lying is Clay Tippins when he entered into my office and said he wanted to have a confidential conversation. And sadly enough, we did not. It was intentional in what he was doing, which was setting me up. The conversation we had was a conversation around his uncle about a piece of legislation. It is very clear. And sadly enough, you understand when you take it out of context and you look at it through the prism by which you're wanting to look at it, it looks very different. But the truth of the matter is, I'm never going to apologize for standing up for conservative public policy around education that gives our kids better options. And the truth is, you're the only one that has taken illegal campaign contributions as Secretary of State, over $300,000 from people in which you regulate.
30-second rebuttal.
Well, I would just, again, say it's no surprise that you won't answer the question. You won't take responsibility. You're trying to deflect from your own words, and people are not buying that fake news out there.
Lieutenant Governor, your question for the Secretary of State.
My question for Secretary of State, again, is in your duties as a Secretary of State, there have been the professional licensing boards in which you regulate. There were sexual assaults for massage therapists that were 25 out of 26 that went completely unanswered. And sadly enough, these individual women are at risk, and there is not justice that has been done. My question to you is, when are you going to stand up and do your job as Secretary of State?
Well, again, you can see that Casey Cagle is lying about the facts. Justice is being done. It's going through the process. As long as you've been around 24 years in state government, as long as I've been married, you should know that the governor appoints the board members. The board members have the regulatory authority over the boards. We do the administrative work for the licensing boards. And Chris Carr, the Attorney General, represents the boards. And they're going through that process right now on prosecutions if the evidence is there. And that is the fact. And you shouldn't stretch the truth and lie to the good people of this state.
Well, the only person that, sadly enough, is not doing their job is the Secretary of State. You can't blame the governor that it is his fault for the board. You are the Secretary of State. Every other Secretary of State in Georgia's history has always intervened in these situations to ensure that people are held accountable, but also that action is taken. The number one complaint that comes into my office as Lieutenant Governor is the Secretary of State's office. His website's never working, and along with every other professional board that is out there, complains. 7 of them have already left, and more want to leave because they know they're going to get shaken down for money, and sadly enough, they're not going to get the compliance in which they need.
Secretary of State, your question now for the Lieutenant Governor.
Well, obviously you've had a hard time being honest with us tonight, but I think hopefully you will, since we've all heard the tapes, and you should be honest this one time. You said on the tape, it's insulting that you were insulting conservative voters for being a hypocrite? Or were you trading legislation for money or being corrupt?
Well, let's be honest. Again, the only person that has been trading anything for money is the Secretary of State. Over $300,000 in which he has taken from people and entities by which he is regulated. On the massage therapist, the 25 out of 26, an individual that he regulates that is in question through a fundraiser for him. I think those are the issues that people are interested in. Doing your job and doing it in a way that protects the citizens of our state. I have done that as Lieutenant Governor, and I'm proud of the work that we have done, and I'm proud of the conservative legislation around education, and I'll continue to fight to ensure that that happens. I've never received a dime from any of those organizations that you're referring to.
Well, the facts are just false once again. You're the special interest candidate. You've taken money from all the special interests. They've done fundraisers for you, and you've used all that money to lie about the facts in the record, because I have not taken a single dollar of an illegal campaign contribution. That is a flat lie. The words on the tape, however, are not a lie. Casey Cagle has trashed conservative voters. And he's also put campaign and politics ahead of policy that he believed in for years for campaign contributions. And if that's not illegal, it should be.
All right, Mr. Cagle, your final question for your opponent.
Secretary Kemp, again, you as a candidate for State Senate, I served with you, and I know for a fact what your record was, and your record was probably the most liberal in the State Senate, not only in terms of taking away our guns during a time of emergency, voting for that, but also putting longer stream buffers in place, which is a taking without compensation for our property rights. But along with that, you articulated a vision for an expansion of Medicaid, which actually would have been far greater by 1 million people than what Obamacare's expansion would have been.
Your question,
is that really
please.
the way you feel?
Well, you know, again, he's lying about the record. Now he's stretching back 15 years. Obviously, he's forgotten the truth. The program that I supported was based after what Republican Governor Tommy Thompson was doing in Wisconsin. It was a welfare to work program. It got 80% of the people off of the welfare rolls and put to work. My opponent is bringing this up because he's trying to deflect from the fact that he supports Medicaid expansion until everybody else in the governor's race made him realize that this is not a conservative issue. The other question about the Second Amendment is absolutely not true. Again, trying to deflect his own record of holding up things like campus carry. I have been a strong defender and an advocate for the Second Amendment, endorsed by Georgia Carry, the Georgia Hunting and Fishing Federation. I hunt, I shoot, and I carry, and I will work as governor to continue to protect and expand our Second Amendment rights.
Well, first of all, the record does not lie, and this is the record. And look at my record as well, a record that has been very strong in standing up for the Second Amendment, but also being there to say no to the expansion of Medicaid. I've done that, and we did it through legislation that was passed on my watch. I have been there as an advocate to ensure that we are not putting more people on an entitlement mentality, but we are working every single day to create a springboard that lifts people up for greater economic opportunity. My opponent, however, has Kemp care, and that's exactly what we can expect if he's the next governor.
Secretary of State Kemp, you have the final question in this round.
Well, let me just say this, that on my final question, I'll go back to the tape again. You know, you call Senator Lindsey Tippins a man of integrity. He said on the record that you advanced legislation to steer $2 million into your campaign account. Is he lying or not?
The reality again, I mean, would someone please show me where $2 million has gone into my campaign? It does not exist. What does exist is the fact that you, along with Clay Tippins, have conspired to create this tape. The only thing you have to run on all across the state is, sadly enough, not your record, and you can't attack me on my record. All you can talk about is a tape that was falsely done under a pretense that was very despicable. And who wants to be, I mean, who literally wants to be known for being someone that you cannot trust? That is what we're experiencing. And I will tell you where my record is strong on these issues, and I have never done anything that would cause me to cause the state to question my integrity.
Well, again, you're forgetting the facts. Forget the tape. What we're talking about is your words, the words of you saying that on tape. They're your words. You should own that and be honest with people. That's what this race is about. It's about trust. Can you trust what he's really telling you? He's raised all this money from special interests, the most ever in a Republican primary. He's using it to lie about my record, stretching the truth. And it's clear that you will put politics ahead of policy and campaign contributions, even if it's potentially illegal.
All right, that concludes our second round. For those of you just joining us, this is the runoff debate between the Republican candidates for governor of Georgia. We will now go back to our esteemed panel to ask questions to the candidate of their choice until we run out of time. And as a point of moderator privilege, I may also ask questions. I'll determine when a rebuttal is also appropriate. Giancarlo Cifuentes, you get the first question in this round.
Thank you. Mr. Lieutenant Governor Cagle, if you are elected governor, will you support the over 24,000 DACA recipients in Georgia that generate millions of dollars to the economy of the state annually?
Well, immigration is an issue that I, again, have led on. The Secretary has not. I've been a person who not only outlawed sanctuary cities, but passed the toughest illegal immigration bill in the country and had the courage to hold Decatur as well accountable to applying with that law. What I will tell you is that the federal government does need to act. They need to pass legislation. President Trump put a deal on the table that, sadly enough, the Democrats rejected. I think that they should have done a deal that, just like the president had put on the table to expand the issue of DACA. But within that context, we have to be focused as a state, and I'm going to be focused on the criminal element to ensure that people are protected, they are safe, and that all of our cities and local law enforcement officers are following our laws.
Senator Parrish, your question?
This is for Lieutenant Governor Cagle, and then Secretary Kemp, you can chime in afterwards as well. As the legislature has expanded the number of conditions for medical marijuana over the last several years, access continues to remain a problem. And I know you recently appointed members to your study committee on access. If cultivation here in Georgia is recommended from that group, would you allow that legislation to go forward if elected?
Well, first of all, the issue of medical marijuana or cannabis oil is one that I have obviously been touched by. I've seen the children that have been impacted in a very positive way. I've seen the parents and their hearts that have gone out on this particular issue. My opponent at the last debate made the comment that there's no medical evidence to support this. Well, I can tell you, I've looked in the eyes of the kids, I've looked in the eyes of the parents, and I've seen how this has impacted their life in a very positive way. I will tell you that we will continue to make sure that access is available for our citizens here in Georgia. I am not in no way, shape, or form in favor of recreational marijuana, nor will I sign any legislation as governor, but I will ensure that our children, through working with their physician and the patient, have access.
Well, my record's been very clear and consistent, unlike my runoff opponent in this race. I will say I'm a father of 3 teenage daughters. I'm very sympathetic to the parents. I, too, have talked to them on the campaign trail. I've seen the great work that has been done by people like Representative Alan Peake on this issue that has been very heartfelt and passionate and based on a lot of different things. I support expansion in the future that's research-based. And I also in no way support recreational marijuana. My position has never wavered on that. I've been consistent from day one.
Maggie Lee, you may now ask a question.
Okay. A question for Secretary Kemp. Let's talk about transit funding. States like New York and Illinois fund transit like buses and trains regularly. And Georgia started doing that with some bond funding in this, Republican-led legislature. And the argument is that it's good for economic development. What would your draft budgets as governor say on transit funding?
Well, I'd say a couple of things. I'm going to be the person that would be a governor that's going to ask, number one, how much is it going to cost? Who's going to pay for it? And make sure that we're getting a good return on investment for those transportation projects. That's why I support projects in the long-term plan, like 4-laning from Macon to LaGrange and up through Chattanooga to get truck traffic off of I-75 South and I-16 to route that around the metro Atlanta. I also support the same thing going up the east side of the state. I support expanding our inland ports as well to do the same and get more of the containers on rail. So I'm not at all against transit funding, but we got to ask how much is it going to cost and who's going to pay for it. And then I certainly support the funding at the local level, which a lot of that has been done. I think that's the best way to put it where the rubber meets the road and is the best value for the taxpayer.
Lieutenant Governor Cagle, your feelings on transit funding?
Well, I do think that obviously what we've heard is really not a plan for transportation, not a plan for the expansion of the opportunity for rapid bus transit and other things that are making a difference. I've led on this issue. I've been there to make sure that we have the funding in place to do the roads and the bridges that are required. We're expected to grow by 4 million people in less than 15 years. We have to have a strategic plan around transportation, and we have to utilize our assets in the most efficient way, going from from worst to first in every single category. I will have a 10-year strategic plan that will start day one to build the infrastructure to sustain the kind of economic growth that we need across our state. We will analyze elevated road systems and reversible lanes, every option available to keep people out of traffic, to be able to connect our cities and our counties and our state together to have a great, prosperous future.
Giancarlo C. Fuentes, your question.
If I may, for both candidates, what is your stance on allowing teachers to carry guns to school, Lieutenant Governor?
The issue pertaining to guns in schools and safety in itself is one that I think all of us have been impacted by. We've watched the news and we've seen the tragedy that has occurred. Our hearts go out in those situations, and it reminds us that, sadly enough, it could occur here in our state, and we have to be diligent to ensure that that doesn't occur. And as a result of that, we passed legislation that requires a school safety program to be put in place for every single school. Many of those schools will harden the school in giving limited access. Others will look at resource officers to be there at every single school and afford and put the funding in place to do that. Obviously, some will look at it in a context by which arming certain students through a process, being post-certified, might be a solution. That is an option, and it is available to them at the local level.
You, I'm sure, meant arming some teachers instead of students, correct?
Yes, students. I'm sorry, not students, but teachers. If I said students, I meant teachers, yes.
Okay. Secretary of State?
Well, I support local control, not only on this issue, but many issues when it comes to education. If local school systems, which we've had some in Georgia that have moved already to arm teachers, I trust those local administrators, school boards, the parents, and that local community, law enforcement, to have that discussion and make that decision. I also support local control when it comes to hardening the school, using, virtual technology to do a better job of protecting our kids. So, and I stand ready and will stand ready as governor to work with our local school systems. But I would urge that we have local control, because in my duties as Secretary of State, being the chief elections official, when we're dealing with election precincts all across the state, I've seen that there is not a one-size-fits-all mentality, and I think that's why it's best left to local control.
And you say local control, but would you be willing, you say you have 3 daughters, to see students armed in their schools?
Not students.
I mean, there I go.
Potentially
to see teachers armed in their schools.
Teachers, if we think that's a good decision, school resource officers, other people that would be trained for that kind of situation, absolutely I would.
All right, Sandra Parrish.
And this question is for Secretary Kemp. A bill for Georgia to go back to paper ballots failed this session, and now there's a lawsuit that would require them for the November general election. What are your thoughts going back to a system that includes paper ballots, and do you have any concerns that the current electronic system could be hacked?
No, I don't have concerns about that. We work just hard every day to make sure that's not going to happen. It's never happened, despite how many millions of dollars that Casey Cagle has spent with this campaign trying to convince Georgians otherwise with our systems of any sort, including the voting systems. Once again, I have led on that issue. We did a pilot project to move us off of our current system in the future to a verifiable paper audit trail in the city of Conyers. That worked very well. That was before the legislative session when nothing got done. Once again, after the session, I led again with creating the SAFE Commission, the Secure Accessible Voting Machine commission that's already met to start the process. Representative Barry Fleming is co-chairing that on me. We've got a lot of local elections officials, cybersecurity people, and we'll give recommendations to the next governor and legislature on where we go from here, and I'm looking forward to helping work on that issue.
Maggie Lee?
I would just say, since
Yes,
it provoked
absolutely.
my name in this, that first of all, again, we're one of the few states that do not have a paper trail to verify that our voting can be secure. With technology today, we've seen it all over the country and the world, that things can be hacked. There's no doubt that the Secretary of State has done two things. One is he turned over the information, which is well documented. It's not something that I'm just saying. But not only that, the servers were not secure on his watch. He did not do his job. If you were in the private sector, you would be fired instantly for that service. And I don't believe that if you're doing a bad job as the Secretary of State that you should be asking for a promotion to be the next governor of the state. He did not lead on this issue. The legislature did, and he stood in the way, and that's unfortunate. Otherwise, we could be in the process of having that.
All right, you have a rebuttal to that?
There you go again, throwing out three different issues to one question to try to muddle the debate. But let me clear it up real quick. We've never been hacked. I haven't released or given out anybody's Social Security numbers. We had an employee that did that, so that is absolutely fake news. And I'm glad that you're so interested in the voting machines now, because for somebody that's been down there for 24 years, you know that state law has to be changed. I'm dictated through state law right now to use the current machines. And it wasn't until this year, when you were running for governor, that you decided to use this issue to target the good people and the good folks all across our 159 counties that work to keep our elections secure.
All right, thank you very much. Maggie Lee, your question now for which candidate?
Sure, a question for Lieutenant Governor Cagle. Let's talk about the man in the White House. Say that as governor, you go up to see President Donald Trump and have a cup of coffee or whatever. What are your talking points in that meeting? What do you ask him to do or not do or to think about for the good of the people of Georgia? Are there any things you'd ask him to reconsider?
Well, there's a number of things that I've been in conversation with his team. I was up there about a month ago, and we talked about issues pertaining to H-2A along with H-2B, and also regulatory environment. It's exciting to me that for every one regulation that is getting put on the books, he's rolling back 23, which is allowing us to do more as a state, but also certainly as a nation. But particularly, I worked with him on a waiver for kids in our College and Career Academy German apprenticeship program, the first of its kind in the country that I started here in Georgia. It's hugely successful, and it's giving kids great opportunities to earn a skill that provides for themselves and their family through a great paying job. But we needed a waiver for them to be able to get into manufacturing at the age of 15, a 3-year program. We were successful in doing that. The president was there to help us, and I think he's doing a great job of moving this economy forward. We're seeing unbelievable growth in this in Georgia and the nation.
Mr. Kemp, what would your conversation be in your talking?
Well, I would certainly talk to him about our ports. I'd talk to him about transportation funding. I know they were very helpful recently on some expansions for rapid bus transit up 400. I'd also talk to him about keeping our families safe. I've had many policies out there to keep our families safe, like track and deport and stop and dismantle and going after gangs like MS-13. He is leading the charge on that for our country. I want to do that as governor, and I would work with him to do that. But also would talk to him about flexibility in health care, where we can use the private sector to open up the markets, the free markets, get more people involved so we can lower costs. Right now we have the special interests that are backing Casey Cagle's campaign that are holding up private sector initiatives. And that's why you need a governor that's going to actually work to put Georgians first ahead of the special interest and bring innovation and private sector solutions to state government.
Giancarlo Cifuentes from Univision.
The question is for both candidates. Lieutenant Governor Cagle, on the subject of religious freedom measure, what would you do to make sure Georgia doesn't lose opportunities of hosting big businesses or being able to be the headquarters of big businesses such as Amazon, which may not be in favor of these type of legislations?
Well, I've been very clear on the issue of religious liberties, that if the legislature passes what is the federal guideline right now, the federal law, that I will also sign it into state law. And I think that the diversity of thought is important. We welcome Amazon to come to the state, and we believe that if they want to make a decision predicated on a financial situation, I believe that they will choose Georgia. But I do want to make a very important point. That the Secretary wants to talk about career politicians. I've been a part-time legislator. I have never received a six-figure salary the entire time that I have been in public office. The Secretary, however, has done that for 8 years. And he continues to, unfortunately, want to talk about and run from his record, but try to cast a light that he's taken no money from special interests, which is completely erroneous, and done the one thing that every other Secretary of State has refused to do, and that is take money from those that he regulates.
Well, I'm not sure which question you want me to answer and rebut first, but I'll just get to the points that he referenced last and work my way backwards. Because I think, again, you're trying to deflect from your record of being in a part-time job, so you shouldn't receive a salary that's in a full-time position. There's a big difference between having less than 10 employees and having no duties outside of the legislative session to somebody that has 250 employees, and we're working literally keeping our systems up 7 days a week and processing serious things that Georgians need every single day, and I am proud of that record. But let's not forget, even though he's in that part-time position that he just talked about, he's taken hundreds of thousands of dollars of commuter flights so he could avoid traffic going from Atlanta to Gainesville. So you can't have it both ways.
Well, I think I get to respond to that. First and foremost, is that it is a full-time position. But sadly enough, in his full-time position, he continues to do all the other extracurricular activities, like, unfortunately, not pay the farmers that he says he's going to pay, and not pay the people that he's borrowed money by which he has been the fiduciary and has signed the guarantee on. I think that that is wrong, and I think the people of Georgia need to understand that we need a governor who's going to do what he says he's going to do and be committed to making sure that you honor your word. There's a clear distinction here.
Secretary Kemp, can you address the religious freedoms issue?
Yes, I support what's in the federal statute. I've been clear on that from day one. I'm glad it took a gubernatorial campaign to get my opponent to come on board with that. And again, what you're saying is not true. I do not owe farmers money. It's the company that owes them, not me. I know it's hard for you being in government for 24 years and not understanding the private sector anymore to understand that. But I think the good people of our state do.
Sandra Parrish from WSB, your next question.
Okay, and both of you can address this. I'll start with Lieutenant Governor Cagle. Georgia has a lot of business ties and investments from European companies. Do you think the president's harsh rhetoric this week towards European allies could hurt that relationship?
Well, actually, I do not. I think the president is doing exactly what he should be doing, and that is standing up for America and ensuring that we have fair trade and that we are working to protect Americans first. And I think that's been his plea, and that's been his commitment, and he's doing it. And I think that in the end, he will get a deal that fundamentally will be sound for American citizens. But I will tell you as well, when we talk about business activity, I know a lot about it. I've been a businessman for 32 years, and I also know what it's like to sign a personal guarantee. When you sign a personal guarantee, you become the fiduciary and the one in which is responsible for paying that. I don't understand why someone like the Secretary thinks that he can hide from just being an investor. You're not an investor when you're a fiduciary, and in this situation, he clearly is.
I mean, again, not true. He's trying to deflect from the bad record that he has, from his words in the tape. You can't trust what this guy says. He's the same guy that said, you know, he was against these private school scholarship credits for years and years and years because it was bad public policy in every sort of the way. And then he changed because he wanted access to millions of campaign dollars. Again, if that's not illegal, it should be. So who do you trust? I've been out on this campaign trail for 15 months, answering every single question about that bad investment, an 8% investment I made in a company. 2 news organizations have fact-checked it. Obviously, he doesn't understand that. He's never going to understand that because he's lying to the good people of our great state.
Well, obviously, I'm not lying about the reality of this situation. And again, I think this issue of the record is important. A record that, sadly enough, as Secretary of State, could not protect our Social Security numbers clear. And sadly enough, all of that information was hacked. All of that has been documented as well. And even though he was warned by it, he still refused to act upon his the decision. This is mismanagement. And sadly enough, this is not what we need as governor. We need someone exactly like my record who has been strong on cutting taxes, $5.7 billion, 700,000 jobs, and 40,000 businesses have been created.
Lieutenant Governor, that's your time. Thank you.
Obviously, his nose is growing again because that is not factual. The server he referenced in this last foray was not the Secretary of State server. I would trust people to look at the record and look at the facts and decide for themselves who is telling you the truth.
All right, Maggie Lee, your question to which candidate?
I'll ask a question to Lieutenant Governor Cagle. Let's talk about maybe Governor Nathan Deal's marquee policy, his setting up of the Criminal Justice Reform Panel, passing legislation. You know, the idea is to reserve the state's prison beds for people we're scared of, not that we're mad at. Would you renew a Criminal Justice Reform Council? And if so, what would you ask it to look at?
I will continue to be committed to the Criminal Justice Council as a reform council. I think it is obviously had tremendous impact on the state of Georgia, and I applaud Governor Deal for his leadership. And it set really a standard for the entire nation that many other states are emulating, and I will continue that effort. Within the context of crime, we have to be committed to making sure that local law enforcement officers are paid well, and we also need to make certain that mental health is not showing up at the door of the jails as well. I don't believe in a criminal justice system that just slaps people on the wrist. We've got to be strong with our crime, against crime, and we have to be clear in our punishment, and we will do that. But the fundamental issue is an issue that we want to create for our state, where there's a better option for people to turn away from a life of dependency and a life of crime to a life of self-reliance. That's what I fought for with my college and career academies and my educational initiatives, which is having a tremendous impact.
Well, I certainly support what the governor's done on criminal justice reform. I mean, he's literally poured his heart and soul into that. That is very clear when you see him talk about that. I am the first to applaud him and other good people at the Capitol that have worked on that issue for many, many years now. But I think the next step, building off of Governor Deal's policies and that legacy, is to have public safety reform, to track and deport criminal illegals, to stop and dismantle street gangs. When we have federal prosecutors that have been appointed by Donald Trump that are saying Georgia has become the distribution hub to the Mexican drug cartel, and that street gangs are literally wreaking havoc in our neighborhood, tens of thousands of gang members from all over the state, getting high school teachers that have been indicted for murdering 3 teenage children because they're recruiting and involved in gangs. That is something that we need to do about. I've worked with local prosecutors, local law enforcement. We'll tear down the silos between federal, state, and local to do a better job and to keep our families safe.
All right, Giancarlo Fuentes.
Well, I would like to give the opportunity to Secretary of State, Mr. Kemp, to address the same question, the DACA question. If you become the next governor of the state of Georgia, will you support the over 24,000 DACA Dreamers recipients in Georgia that generate millions of dollars to this economy annually?
Well, what I support is a legal immigration system that no doubt needs to be reformed in our country. That is the #1 issue, or certainly one of the #1 issues that our President Donald Trump ran on. I support securing the border. I support the president on fundamental immigration reform that really fixes all these problems. It is up to Congress to do this. It is not up to the governor to do this. Certainly there are issues that affect our state that need to be weighed in on. none more so than the H-2A and H-2B visa programs for our farmers and our agribusiness people. That is a huge part of our economy. So I urge Congress as well to act on that, but I certainly support our president in securing the border, taking on gangs like MS-13, curbing the drug trade. We have a message and a public safety reform that lines up exactly behind that, and that's what I will work toward as governor.
Sandra Parrish from WSB.
And I'd like both candidates to address this. And Lieutenant Governor, you can begin. Governor Deal will soon have to appoint another interim director of the Department of the Division of Family and Children's Services, DFACS, the second in less than a year. And now the state agency is being sued after the death of a 10-year-old autistic boy, allegedly at the hands of his adopted father. What actions will you take if elected to shore up the agency from the top down?
Well, when we talk about children's safety and certainly the role that DFACS has, it is an important one because individuals are in now state custody, and we have to ensure that they are safe, that they're protected, and they're cared for at every level. I will be a governor that puts a director in place that understands that that is their #1 objective, and I'm requiring and asking them to follow through. Within that context, we also have to look to greater public-private partnerships. There are so many great organizations that are out there that are not-for-profit, that are willing to step in the gap and help these kids. And I will be a governor that will be steadfast in my commitment to ensure that we're recruiting and getting more of those not-for-profits to solve the problem. Government is not the answer for every single thing. I am proud of what we did with our foster care bill. I'm proud that we now have a temporary ability for other members outside the family to be able to step in and help those needy children.
Well, I think good leadership starts at the top. I certainly know that from the successes we've had in the Secretary of State's office by putting good people in good positions that have moved the needle to make our corporate filing system #1 in the country, to speed up the process, to move a voter registration system off the state's mainframe network, to privatizing that, saving taxpayers millions of dollars, making it more secure, and making it do more work for the county. So we've got to put a good leader in there. I certainly trust Governor Deal to do that. He's done that in the past, and I know that he will on this. But we've also got to have a governor that's going to have innovative policies like my adoption reform plan to move the needle, to streamline the process, to protect parents that are putting their hard-earned money into this process from bad actors that are out there, and also opening up the private sector to innovation, just like we've done in the Secretary of State's office.
All right, Maggie Lee, your question?
Sure, a question for Secretary Kemp. Let's talk about health care. You know, if there's anything people can agree on, people are, have criticisms of the system. There are people who say the Affordable Care Act is broken. There are people who are afraid it'll be repealed. They're afraid they'll lose access to health care. There are people who want a Medicaid expansion and people who say it's too expensive. What do you say to all these constituencies out there?
Well, I would say that you need a governor that's going to put you first ahead of the special interest. It's clear in this runoff who the special interests are supporting. They like things just the way they are. They stand to make millions with Medicaid expansion, which my opponent was for before he was against. What we need is a governor that will look at innovation to lower costs, to make the system more efficient. And when you think about rural health care, we need a governor that has a plan to strengthen rural Georgia, like running high-speed internet so we can have telemedicine. We've worked with different licensing boards, including nurses, to have a compact so it makes it easier to do telemedicine. We've got to look and make it easier for access. But we also have to look to the rural economy, because throwing more government money at our Medicaid program or health care programs has not been working. I mean, a normal family cannot pay a $1,200 to $2,000 premium every month with a $5,000 deductible. So Obamacare is not working. We've got to unleash the private sector to fix this problem. I have the experience to do that.
Well, first of all, the special interest continues to come up, and the only special interest is the Secretary of State, who continues to say that he's not a career politician and he's not in the back pockets of special interests, but yet his actions say differently. But this is an important race. It's important around the issue of health care, and I've led on that particular issue around making sure that we shore up our rural hospitals that, sadly enough, too many of them are closing. I passed the 180 180 bill that allows a tax credit to assist those hospitals. I've expanded more telemedicine all across the state, and we will do more, but also a healthcare task force or innovation center along with a council that I'm going to put in place to bring stakeholders together to really create a healthcare delivery and insurance product that is right for Georgia. Not a one-size-fits-all, not the kind of thing that the Secretary advocates for where Tommy Thompson did. Something that's right for Georgia, that is affordable, and a delivery system that is second to none.
Sandra Parrish, your question?
And both of you gentlemen can address this. Georgia is still awaiting a definitive answer to its water war with Florida. It's an issue that's plagued the last two governors. What are your plans should Georgia ultimately lose the case? And would you pursue legal action with Tennessee over its miscalculated boundary line at the Tennessee River? You can begin, sorry.
Well, first of all, Georgia's not going to lose, and I have been at the forefront of the water issue, helping pass the statewide water management plan, which today has really aided us in our ability to fight this issue in court. We're using less water in the metro Atlanta area now than we did 10 years ago. It's a remarkable accomplishment. Even with ag, we are now metering that. And I will be a governor that's going to put the resources in place to ensure that we're defending our resource, which is critical for our long-term success and our growth, and certainly for our people. And along with that, I will just say that Florida and Alabama they do not have a statewide water management plan, and they have not made the case. I will be a governor that will be steadfast in our commitment to protect our resources and put the money in place to do so.
Thank you. Well, I obviously will do the same. It's about putting Georgians first. I will do that as governor when it comes to our water, to protect our citizens, to protect our ability to grow, and to protect our abilities to water our crops and feed our families. But I think we also need to take advantage of the situation that we have with water in Georgia and use that to recruit other businesses that we want to have come here. And I think we can do a lot of that in agriculture. We've got great research institutions, which is highlighted in my plan to strengthen rural Georgia, where I think we can be even better stewards of water that will attract industry, that will attract farm and agribusiness to our rural communities and help move the needle on economic development in those areas of the state where that has been either stagnant or decreasing, quite honestly. And I'll be a governor that will do that and put Georgians first when it comes to water.
All right, Giancarlo Cifuentes.
This question is for both gentlemen. What would you consider is the biggest issue or problem Georgia and its residents are facing right now as a state? And what kind of initiatives or plans are you preparing if you become the next governor to tackle this problem? Mr. Kemp?
Well, that's what I've been talking about for over 15 months, is putting Georgians first ahead of the special interests, the status quo, the politically correct, and those that are here illegally. It starts with a conservative 4-point plan. Make Georgia #1 for small business by taking a chainsaw to government regulations. That's good for our whole state. Reforming state government, where we can do real tax reform by lowering income tax rates or increasing deductions that are broad-based, not for the special interest. That helps every community around our state. Making sure that we have a plan to strengthen rural Georgia and put Georgians first. And then we have a governor that's going to put them first with public safety reform and keep our families safe so they want to live in these communities. It really depends on where you live to what your issue is. If you're in rural Georgia, you're looking for jobs and investment and a better tax base and rural health care and options like telemedicine. If you're living in the metro Atlanta or working there, you're looking for transportation relief, and you need innovation when it comes to that. We also need to look at it from an economic development standpoint, and that's what I will do as governor.
Right now in the state, the greatest challenge that we really do face is our labor participation rate is at an all-time low. What do I mean by that? I mean that too many people are gaming the system and staying at home and collecting a government check. That's going to stop on my watch. If you're an able-bodied individual, you're going to be back into the workforce. We need you there. We're not going to allow you to stay at home. We're going to make sure we have drug testing and we have a work requirement to make it difficult. But we're also going to ensure that we have retraining programs for adults. But secondly, we're going to ensure that we're focused at the K-12 education level, giving kids a better option than turning to a life of crime or a life of dependency on government. We've done that with the creation in 2007 of my College and Career Academy network, where today we have 46 of those all across the state. 98% graduation rates, 100% placement rates when they're done. They have $30, $40, $50, $60,000 a year salaries that are waiting on them, and that's the right path to be on. When we build a workforce that is second to none, we will see great economic prosperity all over the state to an even higher level.
All right, gentlemen, that is all the time we have for questions. Each candidate will now have 60 seconds for a closing statement. Brian Kemp, you get the first closing statement.
Well, thank you so much for having me tonight. You know, you've heard a lot of nonsense from my opponent. He's spending millions of dollars attacking my record, quite falsely, I might add. And I would ask people, when they go vote on or before July 24th, who do you really trust in this race? Who do you trust to tell you the truth? It's clear that you can't trust Casey Cagle anymore, because he'll say one thing in private and something different in public. I have been running this race for 15 months, looking people in the eye and telling them, I'm the guy that's running for governor that wants to put you first, ahead of those special interests, the status quo, and the politically correct. And if you will honor me with your vote and your support, I'll work hard every day to do just that. I'm just like you. I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a small business person. I've been working hard all my life. And if I'm honored to be your governor, I'll work hard for you as well. Thank you.
All right, Secretary of State, thank you so much. Lieutenant Governor Cagle.
Well, thank you all very much for hosting us tonight, and thanks to the viewers for tuning in as well. I do think that this race is very important. Number one, do we continue on the pace and the path that we are currently in? This state is the envy of the nation. No one compares to who we are. And when you look at the number one state to do business in, historic job growth numbers, 40,000 businesses, but also a tax cut of $5.7 billion. It has fueled this economy in an amazing way, and a workforce that is second to none that I will build as your next governor. If you want that, then I can continue to do that for you as your next governor. But also, if you want a candidate that is going to come out of the primary, that is your best chance of winning in December against Stacey Abrams, I'm the only guy in every poll that has demonstrated that I can win and I will win. And I'll continue to win for you on the issues of importance, and it is an honor to have your support and would be honored to have your vote.
And that concludes our debate. Thank you so much. We'd like to remind voters that the runoff elections will be held Tuesday, July 24th. Thanks for joining us.